believable, Charles. You're saying the words, but you're not convincing. You're saying the words that I can see in your eyes that you're not telling us the truth.
I'm telling the truth.
So you're not.
In today's story, we are in Harrington, Delaware. Harrington is a rural farming town home to a few hundred short of 4,000 people. Our story begins with Charles Holden. He got off of work on June 22nd, 1991 at 11 p.m. On the way home, he stopped to get a hamburger at a local fast food restaurant. He goes inside, he gets his food, and on the way out, he is approached by a man who was looking for a ride to Georgetown. Charles said that he would not take him that far, but was headed in that direction, so both Charles and the hitchhiker got into his truck. After driving in the direction of Georgetown for a few miles, Charles told the man that he was not going to drive any further and politely asked him to get out of the truck. Charles had stopped about a half mile before his property because he didn't want the hitchhiker to know which house was his. The man became enraged. He grabbed Charles and they began to wrestle around in the truck. Charles freed himself and got out of the truck. He ran behind the truck. The hitchhiker took a screwdriver from inside the truck and used it as a weapon. Charles and the hitchhiker continue to fight outside of the truck. The fight reaches a stalemate as the hitchhiker tells Charles that he will kill him if he doesn't drive him the entire way. Charles agrees to drive him the rest of the way. As they headed back towards the truck, Charles was able to get in, lean over, and lock the passenger door manually and pull away before the hitchhiker could get into the passenger side of the vehicle. He drove off, leaving the hitchhiker standing at the intersection of Highway 14 and Killen Ponds Road. Shaken up by what had just happened to him, Charles drove around for a while as he was afraid the hitchhiker might see what home he lived in had he gone straight there. About 20 minutes later, Charles drove up the driveway to his house and saw the hitchhiker suspiciously walking around his property. Not wanting to interact with the man again, Charles backed out of his driveway and drove to the nearest payphone to call the police. Charles met the police at the house that he shared with his mother, Dorothy. When the police arrived, they discovered a window had been broken on the back door of his farmhouse. Inside, they found Charles's mother, 70-year-old Dorothy Donovan, dead in her bedroom. Detectives described the scene as brutal, with blood everywhere and blood spatters throughout. She had been stabbed repeatedly in the chest and face. The medical examiner report details the wounds as deep with wavy diagonal slices. The detectives consider this to be overkill, meaning that someone really wanted to ensure that she was dead, by doing more than what was necessary to kill her. This would be consistent with a person who has a close relationship with the victim. Dorothy's purse was in the bedroom, but it was left untouched. This rules out robbery as the motive. If nothing was taken, then why was she killed? Dorothy Donovan was twice widowed with 7 grandchildren. She was the unlikely victim of violence. Her family said she had no known enemies. They lived in a very safe farming community, where everybody knew each other. Charles made the statement when seeing his mother's body, "I can't believe he killed her. I can't believe he killed her." Charles told investigators that he knew the man who had been walking outside the house. It was someone who had asked him for a ride that night while he was getting a hamburger after work. He gave the man a ride, but when he said that he would not go further, the man got angry. Charles said that the man might have killed his mother for revenge. Police don't believe his story.
An idiot would believe that story. Not me, an experienced policeman. An idiot wouldn't believe that story.
Detectives wondered if the hitchhiker ever existed. How did the hitchhiker know where Charles lived? There were other homes in the area. In order for the hitchhiker to get to Charles' house from where he was left, he would have had to walk half a mile and make a turn. Detectives questioned why this hitchhiker would choose that house and why he would kill the person inside. Charles was surprised by the allegations detectives were making about him having something to do with his mother's death. Detectives didn't believe that the events he were describing actually took place. To detectives, the events that he was describing did not seem logical.
You're telling us about a black man who assaulted you at the intersection, and then minutes later murdered your mother. That's what you're trying to get us to believe. And I'm saying it's just not logical. I don't think it's physically possible for that black man to get from that intersection to your house, kill your mother in the time it takes you to ride from the intersection to your house. It's just not possible, Charles. It's not believable.
Investigators find an accidental death insurance policy with Charles as the beneficiary. Charles was having some financial difficulty at the time. He had some farming debt that he had accrued over the past year. Charles, who had no criminal record, refused to take a polygraph. By not taking the polygraph, detectives believe he had something to hide.
Yes, I am.
We wouldn't come in here and say this to, we just wouldn't do it if we believed that it happened any other way.
No, I did not.
And we have proof.
What proof?
Detectives found a bloody palm print on the railing of the stairs, which could only have been left by the killer as the attack occurred in the bedroom.
It's going to be your fingerprint.
Murder in the first degree, death penalty.
Charles's palm print was compared to the print left on the railing. The result left detectives speechless. The palm print on the railing did not match Charles's palm print. Detectives now must revisit Charles' story as if it was actually true. However, investigators still believe that Charles was involved. Detectives now believe that he must have hired someone to kill his mother. Maybe the man that Charles was with that night was not a hitchhiker, but the person he had hired to kill his mother. Detectives went back to the fast food restaurant. They located witnesses who saw a black male walking through the parking lot looking for a ride. Witnesses state that they did see that individual get into the truck with Charles. Detectives asked Charles to describe the hitchhiker. With the description he gave, the police created this sketch. Investigators created a photo lineup out of known criminals in the area who fit the description. When that lineup was shown to Charles and the witnesses from the fast food restaurant, they all pointed to the same man. This man looked remarkably similar to the sketch. Investigators believe that they had found the person who was responsible for the crime. They locate the man at his residence in Harrington, Delaware. Upon seeing him, they know he was not the perpetrator, as he had a full beard, while the man in the sketch did not. This was a devastating setback for the investigation. They were back to square one. Investigators at the crime scene found blood on the light switch in the living room that was determined not to be from the victim. That blood must have come from the killer. Investigators believe the killer cut himself as he broke the glass on the back door. The blood was compared to Charles and all other suspects in the case. It did not match anyone in the case file. Even after Charles' story was corroborated by witnesses, detectives still believe that he was involved in some way, as the story he gave seemed unbelievable. With no new leads, the case went cold. 10 years pass. Detectives in the state of Delaware are now able to access CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System. CODIS is the national DNA database for known criminals. The FBI entered the DNA of Dorothy Donovan's killer into the system and got a match. The DNA matched career criminal Gilbert Cannon. Police determined that Gilbert was living in Delaware at the time of Dorothy's murder. In the time between Dorothy's murder and the DNA match, Gilbert was in prison on drug and robbery charges. However, he had recently been released. Police tried to track down Gilbert, but no one knew where he was. Detectives obtained mugshots of Gilbert from the early 90s and compared them to the sketch. He fit the sketch quite well. After 2.5 months of searching, detectives located Gilbert at his girlfriend's place, only 40 miles away from Dorothy's house. When detectives interviewed Gilbert, he denied having any involvement in the murder.
I'm not gonna sit here and say that I killed somebody or that I was even there.
Well, Gilbert, one thing I can tell you is you were there. It's impossible for you not to be there, Gilbert. We're just telling you on tape. That is your DNA. No ifs, ands, or buts. It's no one else's. It's a perfect match. I don't know what you were doing back then. I have no idea. And we were actually hoping to sit down and try to get this resolved. Because Gilbert, you know.
Like I said, I ain't killed nobody. That ain't even me.
To ensure that they had the right guy, detectives took Gilbert's palm print to compare to the one left on the railing at the crime scene. The print on the railing matched Gilbert's palm print. Detectives confront Gilbert with the evidence against him. He continues to deny any involvement, but after a few hours of soul searching, Gilbert reconsidered. He knocked on the holding cell and stated that he wanted to talk to investigators.
Basically, I went out. I don't know whether it's the drugs or what or whatever. Honestly, I don't have any reason to lie about it now. I didn't have to say this.
Sure.
Gilbert said that on the night of the murder, he was high on cocaine, the white, flowery baking stuff, and was looking for more. That's when he ran into Charles at the fast food restaurant. Charles agreed to give Gilbert a ride, but refused to take Gilbert all the way to Georgetown. That's when the fight broke out. Charles was eventually able to drive away before Gilbert could get back in the truck. Gilbert said that he continued in the same direction Charles had driven off in. He walked by a few houses, but they all had lights on, so he stumbled onwards until he found the house of Dorothy Donovan, the first house he believed to be empty. Hey, this one must not have anybody in it. There's no lights on, and it's nighttime. Dorothy Donovan was woken up by Gilbert smashing the glass on the back door. She came to the top of the stairs, believing she would find her son. The man she saw at the bottom of the stairs was Gilbert Cannon. Gilbert thought that Dorothy could identify him, so he chased after her as she tried to escape to her bedroom. Gilbert used a screwdriver that he took from Charles's truck to stab Charles's mother to death. Detectives believe that as Charles was pulling into the driveway, Gilbert was fleeing the scene. Charles saw Gilbert and left to call the police. Gilbert explains that it was a coincidence that he chose Dorothy's house. He had no idea of the connection between Dorothy and Charles. Gilbert was shocked when he found out that Dorothy was Charles's mother. With a death sentence on the cards, Gilbert Cannon pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life without parole. Not only was justice served against Gilbert, but it was also served for Charles, who was suspected to be involved all along, but was eventually exonerated more than 10 years after the crime.